Give my mom your room or get out of here right now. Those words hit me like a slap across the face. My son-in-law, Derek, stood there, his finger pointed at me like I was some stranger who'd wandered into his house uninvited. My 7-year-old granddaughter, Naomi, peeked around the corner, her eyes wide with fear. My own daughter, Tiana, just stood there on the stairs, looking away like she couldn't bear to meet my eyes. I'm Loretta Jenkins, and at 65 years old, I thought I knew what betrayal looked like. I was wrong. If you're watching this story, give it a like right now. Hit that subscribe button because what I'm about to share will shock you. Also, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this message reaches. Also, download your ebook titled Suspense and Thriller Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment. 3 years. 3 years I'd lived in that house, helping raise his daughter, cooking his meals, keeping his home running while he built his construction business. 3 years of Sunday dinners and bedtime stories and being the grandmother Naomi needed. And now he was throwing me out like yesterday's garbage? But here's what Derek didn't know, what none of them knew. Hidden in my bedroom drawer was a stack of papers that would change everything. Papers that proved this house, the house he was so eager to kick me out of, wasn't entirely his. The morning I found those forged documents in the mail, my hand shook so hard I could barely hold them. My late husband Calvin always told me to keep my eyes open and my mouth shut until I had all the facts. That advice was about to save my life. Because what I discovered next would turn their world upside down. And sometimes when people forget your worth, you have to remind them, not with tears or begging, but with the cold, hard truth. My name is Loretta Jenkins, and this is the story of how I went from being treated like a burden to owning the very ground they stood on. This is about family, betrayal, and what happens when you underestimate a woman who's been quiet for too long. But first, let me take you back to where it all began. Back to the day my husband died and my daughter convinced me to trust her with my future. 8 years ago, Calvin collapsed in our kitchen while making his morning coffee. 1 minute he was humming an old gospel song, the next he was gone, just like that. The doctor said his heart gave out, massive attack, no warning signs. I was left staring at our empty house, wondering how walls that once held so much laughter could suddenly feel so hollow. The memories were everywhere. Calvin's reading chair by the window, the kitchen table where we'd shared 37 years of breakfast conversations, even the creaky floorboard in the hallway that he always promised to fix but never did. I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. When I put it up for sale, Tiana cried, "Mama, you can't sell Daddy's house. Where will you go?" That's when she made the offer that seemed like a blessing. She and Derek had just bought this beautiful 4-bedroom house in suburban Georgia. "Come live with us," she said, squeezing my hands tight. "We want you close. You can have the guest suite downstairs, your own bathroom, your own space. Naomi needs a grandmother." The first year felt like healing. I'd wake up to the sound of little feet running down the hallway. Naomi would climb into my bed for morning cuddles before school. I'd pack her lunch, braid her hair, help with homework. Tiana worked long shifts at the hospital, and Derek's construction business kept him busy, so I became the steady heartbeat of that house. Sunday dinners were my favorite. I'd cook Calvin's famous fried chicken recipe while Derek told stories about his work sites. Tiana would laugh until her sides hurt. Naomi would sneak extra biscuits when she thought nobody was looking. We felt like a real family. But success has a way of changing people. Derek's business started booming. New contracts, bigger projects, more money flowing in. With each promotion and profit, I watched him change. The humble man who used to thank me for every meal became someone who expected it. The son-in-law who once asked about my day started walking past me like I was furniture. Then his mother, Miss Ruth, started visiting more often. Ruth was sharp-tongued and proud, the kind of woman who measured her worth by how much control she had over others. From day one, she made it clear I was an outsider in what she considered her son's house. "Loretta," she'd say with that fake sweet smile, "you sure do cook a lot for someone who doesn't contribute to the grocery bill."
Or my personal favorite, some people just love making themselves comfortable in other folks' homes. I bit my tongue every time. Calvin always taught me that responding to poison with poison just spreads the sickness. But one evening, I was putting away dishes when I heard Ruth talking to Derek in the kitchen. Her voice was low, but the walls were thin. "She needs to go, son. You and Tiana can't build your real life with her hovering around all the time." Derek sighed heavy. "Mama, you know Tiana gets emotional about family stuff. Then you better learn to put your foot down before this gets out of hand."
The changes started like a slow leak in a pipe. You don't notice it at first, but eventually the damage becomes impossible to ignore. Derek stopped saying good morning. For 3 years, he'd poke his head into the kitchen where I'd be making coffee and ask how I slept. Suddenly, he'd walk right past me like I was invisible. When I'd greet him, he'd grunt or nod without looking up from his phone. Family movie nights became couple time. Sunday dinners got moved to restaurants where, coincidentally, there wasn't room for everyone. When I suggested we take a vacation together, maybe rent a cabin by the lake like we used to talk about, Derek's response cut deep. "We're trying to have our own family experiences, Miss Loretta. You understand." Miss Loretta, not Mama Loretta, like he'd called me for years. The distance in those 2 words felt like miles. Tiana started avoiding my eyes during these moments. My own daughter, the little girl I'd rocked to sleep through thunderstorms and cheered for at every school play, was choosing silence over standing up for me. I watched her loyalty shift like sand, and it broke something inside me I didn't know could break. The worst part was watching it affect Naomi. My sweet granddaughter started spending more time in her room. When I'd ask if she wanted to bake cookies or read stories, she'd look toward her parents' room first, like she needed permission to love me. One afternoon, I found her crying in the backyard. "What's wrong, baby girl?" She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "Daddy said I can't call you Grandmama anymore. He said I should call you Miss Loretta like he does." My heart shattered right there in the grass. I pulled her close, feeling her small body shake against mine. "You call me whatever feels right in your heart, sweetheart. Nobody can change what we mean to each other." But even as I comforted her, I felt the walls closing in. I was becoming a stranger in the house I'd helped make a home. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in March. Tiana sat me down at the kitchen table with that look, the same expression she'd worn as a child when she'd broken something and was trying to figure out how to tell me. "Mama," she started, her voice soft and careful. "Derek's mama isn't doing too well. Her arthritis is getting worse, and she's having trouble managing that big house by herself." I nodded, genuinely concerned. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Tiana's smile looked forced. "Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. She might need to move in with us for a while, just temporarily, until we can figure out a better situation." "Of course," I said immediately. "We've got room. She can take the upstairs guest room." Tiana's face fell. "Well, that's the thing. Derek thinks it would make more sense for Miss Ruth to have your room since it's on the first floor. You know, easier for her with the arthritis and all." The words hung in the air like smoke. I stared at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw a woman I barely recognized. When had she become someone who could ask her own mother to give up her home for her mother-in-law's comfort? "You mean the room I've lived in for 3 years?" I asked quietly. She nodded quickly, like ripping off a bandage. "It's just temporary, Mama. Maybe a few months. You could take the upstairs room." Have you ever felt unwelcome in your own home? That moment when you realize the people you die for see you as disposable? 2 weeks.
That's how long I had to think about it before Miss Ruth moved in. But I'd already made my decision the moment Tiana asked. I wasn't moving. This wasn't about a room. This was about respect, dignity, and whether I was going to let them erase me from my own life, one compromise at a time. When Miss Ruth arrived with their suitcases and attitude, I was sitting in my chair in my room, reading my Bible like any other evening. "Loretta," Derek said from my doorway, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. "We talked about this. Mama needs this room." I looked up from my scripture and met his eyes calmly. "And I told Tiana I wasn't moving. Your mother is welcome to the upstairs room." His jaw clenched. "She can't handle those stairs every day." "Neither can I, Derek. I have arthritis too, remember? Plus, this has been my home for 3 years. I've earned the right to some stability." From his perspective, I probably looked like a stubborn old woman causing problems. He'd worked hard to buy this house, provide for his family, and now his mother needed help. In his mind, I should have been grateful for any room they gave me. But he didn't understand what he was really asking. He wanted me to pack up my life, my photos of Calvin, my comfortable chair, my familiar space, and squeeze myself into whatever corner they deemed appropriate. He wanted me to become smaller so his mother could be bigger. "This is my house," he said, his voice getting harder. "My name is on the deed." "And this is my home," I replied. "There's a difference." Miss Ruth appeared behind him, her face twisted with indignation. "I can't believe the disrespect. In my day, elders knew their place." "In your day," I said evenly, "elders were honored, not shuffled around like inconvenient furniture." The tension in that hallway was thick enough to cut. Naomi appeared at the top of the stairs, watching the adults in her life tear each other apart over a bedroom. Tiana stood frozen between her husband and her mother, looking like she wanted to disappear. For the next week, it was war. Cold, silent war. Derek would stomp past my room every morning, making sure I heard his displeasure. Miss Ruth made loud comments about selfish people whenever I was within earshot. Tiana tried to play peacemaker, but her efforts felt hollow. "Mama, please," she begged one evening, "can't you just try the upstairs room? For the family." "I am thinking about the family," I told her. "I'm thinking about what kind of family throws out the person who helped build their home the moment someone more important comes along." The final straw came on a Thursday morning. I was making breakfast, something I'd done every day for 3 years, when Derek walked into the kitchen. His face was set in stone. "Loretta, I'm done playing games. My mother needs that room, and you're going to give it to her." "No, I'm not." "Then maybe," he said, his voice rising with each word, "you should think about finding somewhere else to live altogether." The kitchen went dead silent. Even the coffee machine seemed to stop gurgling. Naomi, who'd been eating cereal at the counter, looked up with wide, frightened eyes. "Excuse me?" I said. That's when he exploded. "When family turns on you, you need to know your rights. Subscribe, because what happened next changed everything."
"Give my mom your room or get out of here right now." The words exploded out of Derek like a dam bursting. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck, finger jabbing toward me like I was his worst enemy. The man who once called me his second mother was screaming at me in front of his child. Naomi dropped her spoon. It clattered against her cereal bowl, milk splashing across the counter. Her little face crumpled with confusion and fear. She'd never heard her father yell like that at anyone, especially not at me. "Derek!" Tiana's voice came from the stairway, sharp with shock. But he wasn't done. 3 years of resentment poured out of him like poison. I'm sick of this, sick of you acting like you own this place. This is my house. I pay the mortgage. I pay the bills. You contribute nothing. Each word hit me like a physical blow. Nothing? I raised his daughter while he worked. I cooked thousands of meals, cleaned his messes, been there for every scraped knee and bad dream. I'd given up my own home, my own independence to help build his family. Daddy, stop. Naomi's voice was small and scared. Go to your room, baby, I said gently, never taking my eyes off Derek. No, he snapped. She needs to hear this. She needs to understand that some people take advantage of kindness. That's when something inside me broke. Not my spirit, my patience. Take advantage. I stood up slowly, my voice deadly calm. I helped you buy this house, Derek. When you couldn't qualify for the full mortgage, who co-signed? When you needed money for the down payment, who gave it to you? His face flickered with something, maybe guilt or fear that I was remembering things he'd hoped I'd forgotten. That was different, he said, but his voice had lost some of its fire. Was it? Because I remember you promising this would always be my home too. I remember you saying family takes care of family. Tiana finally came down the stairs, but instead of standing between us, she moved toward her husband. My own daughter, choosing sides right in front of me. Mama, maybe we should all calm down and talk about this later. Talk about what, Tiana? About how your husband just told your mother to get out of her own home? She couldn't meet my eyes. It's complicated. No, baby girl. It's simple. Either I'm family or I'm not. Either this is my home or it's not. You can't have it both ways when it's convenient. Derek stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. You want to know the truth, old woman? You've overstayed your welcome. We took you in out of pity, and you've been a burden ever since. My mother deserves better than being stuck upstairs while you hog the best room in the house. The cruelty in his voice was breathtaking. This wasn't anger anymore. This was calculated meanness designed to hurt me as deeply as possible. Naomi started crying. Real tears. The kind that come from watching your safe world crumble. She ran to me, wrapping her arms around my waist. Don't be mean to Grandmama, she sobbed. Derek's face softened for just a moment when he saw his daughter's tears, but then he hardened again, like he was forcing himself to be cruel. Naomi, go upstairs. Now. But Daddy, now! She flinched like he'd hit her. My heart shattered watching this little girl get caught in the crossfire of adult hatred. She looked up at me with those big, scared eyes. It's okay, sweetheart, I whispered, kissing the top of her head. Go on upstairs. Everything's gonna be all right. After she left, the kitchen felt like a tomb. Tiana stood there wringing her hands, looking everywhere except at me. Derek crossed his arms, waiting for my surrender. So what's it going to be, Loretta? The room or the door? I looked at my daughter one last time, hoping to see some flicker of the little girl who used to defend me against playground bullies, but she just stared at the floor. I need time to think, I said finally. You've got until tomorrow morning. Decide. That night I prayed. I prayed for wisdom, for strength, for the right path forward. I could stay and fight, turn this house into a battlefield where my granddaughter would suffer, or I could leave with my dignity intact and let them live with their choices. But what I found in the mail the next morning changed everything. The envelope was addressed to me, but it had been opened, carelessly resealed like whoever opened it didn't think I'd notice. Inside were documents that made my blood run cold. Deed transfer papers, property tax reassessment forms, and there, clear as day, was my signature on a refinancing document I'd never seen before in my life. My hand shook as I read through the legal language. Someone had been trying to transfer ownership of the house. Someone had forged my name on financial documents. Someone had been stealing from me right under my nose. I sat on my bed, staring at those papers, and suddenly everything made sense. Derek's sudden wealth, his arrogance, his desperation to get me out of this room. He wasn't just trying to make space for his mother, he was trying to cover up a crime. The refinancing document showed that my retirement account had been used as collateral. Money I'd saved for 30 years, money Calvin had left me, had been tied up in this house without my knowledge. And now someone was trying to transfer my share to Miss Ruth. My phone rang. It was my bank. "Mrs. Jenkins, this is Patricia from First National. We need to verify some recent activity on your account. There's been a large withdrawal request that requires your authorization." "What kind of withdrawal?" $50,000. The request came from a Derry Williams claiming to be your son-in-law with power of attorney. The room started spinning. I never gave anyone power of attorney. "Ma'am, we have documents here with your signature." "Those are forged," I said, my voice getting stronger. "I need to come in immediately." After I hung up, I sat there piecing together the puzzle. Derek's construction business hadn't been as successful as he claimed. He'd been using my money, my credit, my name to keep himself afloat. And when that wasn't enough, he decided to steal the house itself. The man who'd screamed at me about contributing nothing had been robbing me blind for months. I thought about all those times he'd insisted on handling the paperwork for me, all those documents he'd asked me to sign for tax purposes, all those moments when he'd made me feel like a burden while he was literally living off my money. But here's what really got to me. Tiana had to know. You don't refinance a house, forge signatures, and steal $50,000 without your wife noticing. My daughter hadn't just chosen her husband over her mother. She'd chosen to be part of a conspiracy against me. I called Mr. Calloway, an old friend from church who'd become a lawyer. His voice was grave when I explained the situation. "Loretta, this is serious. We're talking about fraud, forgery, elder abuse. You need to come in right away." "What are my options?" "Well, first we need to establish what you actually own. If your name is on the original deed and you contributed to the down payment, you might have more rights than they think." "What do you mean?" "I mean, they might have been trying to steal something that was already yours." That afternoon, I sat in Mr. Calloway's office while he made phone calls and pulled records. What he found made my jaw drop. "Loretta, according to these documents, you own 51% of this house. When Derek couldn't qualify for the full mortgage 3 years ago, you weren't just a co-signer, you were listed as the primary owner. But Derek said his name was on the deed." "It is, but yours is first, and with your larger financial contribution, you're the majority owner. Legally, he can't sell, refinance, or transfer anything without your explicit consent." The irony was beautiful. The man who'd been screaming about it being his house had been living in mine. "So what does this mean?" Mr. Calloway smiled. "It means you have options they don't know about. The question is, was she right to fight back, or should she have forgiven?" I spent that night planning. Not revenge, justice. There's a difference, though sometimes they look the same from the outside. The next morning, I got dressed in my best church outfit. Navy blue dress, pearl earrings Calvin gave me for our 20th anniversary, and the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing you hold all the cards. Derek was in the kitchen, coffee in hand, probably expecting me to come crawling with my suitcases packed. "Well," he said without looking up from his phone, I've made my decision. Good. When are you moving out? I set an envelope on the counter next to his coffee cup. I'm not. He glanced at the envelope, then at me. What's this? Open it. His face went from annoyed to confused to absolutely terrified as he read the legal documents inside. Eviction notice. 60 days to vacate the premises, signed by the majority property owner, me. This is a joke, he said, but his voice cracked. Do I look like I'm joking? Tiana appeared in the doorway, probably drawn by the tension. What's going on? Your husband is being evicted from my house, I said calmly. Your house? Derek's voice was getting higher. This is my house. Actually, it's not. According to the county records, the bank documents, and the original deed, I own 51% of this property. You can't sell it, refinance it, or transfer ownership without my permission. I pulled out another set of papers. These are the forged documents you used to try to steal my money. The bank has copies. The police have copies. My lawyer has copies. The color drained from his face. You can't prove I forged anything. The handwriting analysis says otherwise. So does the security camera at the bank where you tried to withdraw $50,000 from my account using fake power of attorney documents. Tiana looked back and forth between us like she was watching a tennis match. Mama, what are you talking about? Ask your husband about the refinancing papers he had you sign. Ask him about the money he's been taking from my retirement account. Ask him why he's been so desperate to get me out of this house. Derek's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. You can't do this. I have rights. So do I, and I'm exercising them. The beautiful thing about legal documents is that they don't care about your feelings. They don't care if you think you're entitled to something. They only care about facts, signatures, and who actually owns what. You have 60 days. That should give you enough time to find somewhere else for you and your mother to live. What about Naomi? Tiana's voice was barely a whisper. My heart softened just a little. Naomi is always welcome here. She's my granddaughter, and this will always be her home. But her father needs to learn some respect. Derek slammed his fist on the counter, making the coffee cup jump. This is insane. You can't throw us out of our own house. Watch me. I walked to the front door and opened it. Mr. Calloway was waiting on the porch with a sheriff's deputy, just like we'd planned. Mrs. Jenkins, we're here to serve the official eviction notice. Derek's face went white as the deputy handed him the papers. Official county seal, court stamp, the whole 9 yards. This is harassment, he shouted. No, I said quietly. This is justice. You wanted me out of your house? Well, congratulations. Now you're out of mine. Most people don't know this legal loophole, but it changes everything when you actually read the fine print on your own property. The explosion that followed was nuclear. Derek screamed until his voice went hoarse. He called me every name in the book, threatened to fight the eviction in court, swore he'd make my life miserable. Miss Ruth stood behind him like a general whose army had just been defeated, her face twisted with rage and disbelief. You vindictive old witch, she shrieked. How dare you throw us out on the street? I'm not throwing you anywhere, I said calmly. I'm simply reclaiming what was always mine. The sheriff's deputy stepped forward. Ma'am, I need you to lower your voice. The eviction notice is legal and binding. For the next hour, it was chaos. Derek made frantic phone calls to lawyers who all told him the same thing. The documents were legitimate, the eviction was valid, and he had no legal recourse. Miss Ruth packed her bags with the fury of a woman who'd never been told no in her life. But it was Tiana's reaction that broke my heart. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the legal papers like they were written in a foreign language. When the deputy left and the shouting died down, she looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "Mama, how could you do this to us?" "How could I do this?" I sat down across from her. "Baby girl, your husband has been stealing from me for months. He forged my signature, used my money without permission, and tried to steal my house. What exactly did you think I should do?" "But we're family." "Are we?" Because family doesn't scream at each other to get out. Family doesn't forge documents and steal money. Family doesn't choose sides when someone's being abused. She flinched at that word, abused. But that's what it was, wasn't it? Financial abuse, emotional abuse, the systematic stripping away of my dignity and rights. "I didn't know about the money." "Didn't you? You signed those refinancing papers, Tiana. You were there when he handled my paperwork. You watched him treat me like garbage and said nothing." The truth hung between us like a wall. She had known, maybe not the full extent, but she'd known something wasn't right and chosen to look the other way. Derek stormed back into the kitchen, his face red with exhaustion and fury. "This isn't over, Loretta. I'll fight this." "With what money?" I asked quietly. "The money you stole from me?" That shut him up real quick. Over the next 2 months, I watched their world crumble piece by piece. Derek hired a lawyer with money he didn't have, only to be told what he already knew. He had no case, the house was legally mine, the eviction was valid, and the fraud charges were very real. Miss Ruth moved out first, muttering curses under her breath as she loaded her car. She found a small apartment across town and spent her days calling anyone who'd listen to complain about the evil woman who'd stolen her son's house. But the real shock came when Derek's business started falling apart. It turned out his success had been built on borrowed money, my money. When the bank froze his accounts pending the fraud investigation, his contractor stopped getting paid. Projects got abandoned. Clients sued for breach of contract. One evening, about 6 weeks into the eviction period, Tiana came to my room. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in 2 months. "Mama, I need to tell you something." I set down my book and waited. "Derek's been lying about everything. The business, the money, all of it." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I found papers in his office. He owes money to everyone. Suppliers, contractors, even some loan sharks." "How much money?" "Over $200,000. I felt my stomach drop. "Tiana, what exactly are you telling me?" "He was planning to sell this house to pay his debts. That's why he wanted you out so badly. He needed to clear the title so he could put it on the market without your signature." The pieces clicked into place. The urgency about the room, the desperation in his voice, the forged documents. He hadn't just been stealing from me, he'd been planning to steal my home and leave me with nothing. "There's more," she continued, tears flowing freely now. "He took out a second mortgage on this house 6 months ago, used forged documents with your signature. The bank is calling it in." My blood went cold. "What does that mean?" "It means even if you keep the house, you might lose it anyway. He owes them $90,000. I sat there absorbing this information. My son-in-law hadn't just betrayed me, he'd potentially destroyed both our futures. And my daughter had been living with this knowledge, watching me fight for a house that might be lost anyway. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I was scared of losing everything. Scared of admitting I married a man who could do this to my own mother." For the first time in months, I saw my real daughter. Not the woman who'd chosen her husband over her mother, but the frightened girl who'd gotten in over her head and didn't know how to swim back to shore. "What are you going to do?" I asked gently. "I don't know. Derek keeps saying he can fix it, that his business will turn around. But Mama, I found something else."
She pulled out a folder from behind her back. Bank statements. He's been taking money from Naomi's college fund, too. Everything we saved for her education, it's gone. That's when I knew there was no coming back from this. A man who would steal from his own child's future was beyond redemption. I'm filing for divorce, she said quietly. I should have done it the day he screamed at you. I should have stood up for you then. I reached across and took her hand. You're standing up now. That's what matters. But the real shock was still coming.
The final piece of the puzzle came from Mr. Calloway 3 days before the eviction deadline. Loretta, you need to sit down for this. I was already sitting in his office, but I gripped the arms of my chair anyway. We've been investigating Derek's financial activities, and what we found is worse than we thought. He didn't just try to sell your house, he actually did sell it. What do you mean? 6 months ago, he found a buyer, signed a contract, took a deposit, the whole thing. The only reason the sale didn't go through was because the title company discovered the ownership discrepancy. Your name was on the deed, but Derek was trying to sell it as sole owner. My head was spinning. So what happened to the deposit money? Gone. He used it to pay off some of his debts, thinking he could complete the sale before anyone noticed. How much money are we talking about? $50,000, money that legally belongs to you as the majority owner. I sat there trying to process this information. Not only had Derek tried to steal my house, he'd actually succeeded in stealing money from its sale, money that was rightfully mine. There's more, Mr. Calloway continued. The buyer is threatening to sue for fraud. They want their deposit back, plus damages. Derek's looking at serious jail time. And the second mortgage? We can fight it. Since your signature was forged, the bank doesn't have a legal claim on the property, but it'll take time and money to sort out. That evening, I sat Tiana and Naomi down for a family meeting. Derek was at his office, probably trying to figure out how to dig himself out of the hole he created. Girls, we need to talk about what happens next. Naomi, bless her heart, had been through so much chaos, she just wanted things to be normal again. Are we staying here, Grandmama? Yes, baby. This is our home and nobody's taking it away from us. Tiana looked up with hope in her eyes. Does that mean? It means you and Naomi are welcome to stay with me, but Derek is not. Not after what he's done. I understand, she said quietly. I've already filed the divorce papers. Over the next few weeks, the truth kept coming out like water from a broken dam. Derek had been running a Ponzi scheme with his construction business, using money from new clients to pay old debts. He'd forged documents, lied to banks, and stolen from everyone who trusted him, including his own family. When the police finally arrested him, I felt no satisfaction, just sadness for the man he could have been, and relief that the nightmare was finally over. The house sale money was recovered and returned to me. The forged mortgage was declared invalid. Derek's creditors could fight over his business assets, but they couldn't touch my home. 6 months later, Tiana's divorce was final. She got custody of Naomi, and we settled into a new rhythm as a family of 3 generations of women who'd survived a storm. One evening, as I was tucking Naomi into bed, she looked up at me with those big, serious eyes. Grandmama, why did Daddy do all those bad things? I thought about how to answer that. How do you explain greed and betrayal to a 9-year-old? Sometimes, sweetheart, people get so focused on what they want that they forget about what's right. Your daddy made some very bad choices, but that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. Do you forgive him?
That was the $1 million question, wasn't it? I'm working on it, baby girl. Forgiveness isn't about saying what someone did was okay. It's about not letting their bad choices poison your heart. A year later, I got a letter from Derek in prison. He was serving 3 years for fraud and elder abuse. The letter was full of apologies and promises to make things right when he got out. I read it once, then put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd be ready to respond. Maybe someday he'd truly understand the damage he'd caused. But that day wasn't today. What I learned through all of this is that family isn't just about blood. It's about respect, loyalty, and love that shows up in actions, not just words. Tiana and I had to rebuild our relationship from the ground up, but we did it with honesty this time. She works as a nurse practitioner now, and we share the household expenses equally. Naomi is thriving in school and has never asked to see her father. Some wounds take time to heal. As for me, I learned that silence might be golden, but speaking up for yourself is priceless. I didn't need to scream or fight or seek revenge. I just needed to know my worth and stand firm in it. The house is peaceful now. We have Sunday dinners again, movie nights, and family prayers. But this time, it's built on truth instead of convenience. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how things turned out. The answer is no. I regret that it had to happen, but I don't regret standing up for myself. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. We've all seen toxic family dynamics. You're not alone if you're dealing with people who take your kindness for weakness. Subscribe for more stories about finding your strength and fighting for your worth. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well and knowing your value. Next week, I'll share another story about family secrets and the price of keeping quiet when you should speak up. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Lastly, download your ebook titled Suspense and Thriller Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment.